The House will now proceed to tributes in the memory of our former colleague, the Honourable Marc Garneau. I now recognize the Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, in this House and across the country, we pay tribute to a Canadian man, an excellent one, who dedicated his life to serving his country. His legacy will last further beyond these walls. He is one of Canada's most accomplished citizens. He was a Marine officer early in his career. He was also the first Canadian in space. He served Canadians for many years as a member of Parliament and minister. Marc Garneau's life was marked by unforgettable moments and experiences, but there was one thing that was constant throughout: service.
The Royal Canadian Navy, the flight suit of an astronaut that bore the flag of our nation, or the suit and tie of a parliamentarian. Marc Garneau served with honor, with humility, and with heart. He inspired a nation in 1984 when he made it into space aboard the Challenger. He reminded us that Canadians could dream big, that we could aim for the stars, quite literally. We forget what a moment that was, Mr. Speaker. I was a young person, and we forget just how big an event Marc Garneau heading into space, representing us all, really was. And when he returned to Earth safely, thankfully, and he did a splendid, incredible tour across this great country, where he would arrive in communities and throngs would be out to greet him. And Marc, who it must be said was a shy, humble, and reserved man, would, you could tell, be bewildered and mystified and absolutely in total awe of this outpouring of emotion for him. But I think he understood then, and certainly understood later, that he became a powerful symbol of the achievement and the accomplishment in this great country of ours. A bilingual, former naval officer, raised from humble origins, who got into the atmosphere. Marc Garneau literally took the dreams and hopes and prayers of little boys and girls everywhere with him into space. And right after making this history, he gave his next decades to building a better Canada right here at home. En tant que ministre des Transports et plus...
As Minister of Transport and later Minister of Foreign Affairs, he was very wise, disciplined, and strong in a quiet way in all decisions that he made. He was a man of science, but also a man deeply attached to the principles of democracy and diplomacy. For many of us in this place, Marc was also a colleague. For many Canadians, he was a national hero. Most of all, he was a good, solid, caring man. His death affects all those who want a society based on ethics and responsibility and knowledge. This reminds us that humble servants of the state can still exist. They can be discreet, but they are also essential. His legacy inspires us. His journey shows each and every one of us that we can dream big, serve greatly, and build a nation.
Late blooming, but very effective partisan, as I'm sure all my colleagues in this House will agree. You know, he spent his first election, he was not successful. And I remember working, which is amazing to consider at this moment, mais dans Vaudreuil-Soulanges.
In Vaudreuil-Soulanges, Marc Garneau ran unsuccessfully. he worked with Mr. Martin, our former Prime Minister. I remember campaigning with Mr. Martin and Mr. Garneau. We arrived in Coteau-sur-le-Lac at an outdoor skating rink, but it was the spring, so there was no more ice. School children came out in massive crowds. No other politician in this place could even dream of attracting such crowds. When you campaign with the party leader and a candidate attracts thousands of young people and adults as well, he was a hero. Even those who did not vote for him, came out to try to meet him, talk to him. Later, of course, Marc succeeded in being elected as a member of Parliament. He took his job very seriously, as you full well know, Mr. Speaker. Marc Garneau was a very invested Liberal, very dedicated. He crisscrossed the country to lend a hand to candidates, to supporters. He also shared his experiences with Liberal supporters and with the community at large. He always combined trips to Vancouver, Abbotsford, Calgary, St. John's, Newfoundland, to the Canadian North. He always took time to meet with young people, school children. I'd like to pay tribute to him. He also participated in the hard work of rebuilding the Liberal Party of Canada back in those days.
So, one of the people I was happiest to see sworn in 2015, it was Marc Garneau. It was his life work. Public service, military service, his trips to space. He also worked as a chancellor at the University of Carleton. He worked at the Space Agency of Canada. A truly remarkable career path with such public service that was humble. It was a rare individual. If you spoke with Marc Garneau, and I'm sure that there are members of this House who have, he was very reserved, somewhat shy, but when you asked him to a question, what was it like to go to space? We saw his eyes light up. We saw how proud he was to have seen with his own eyes the Earth from the atmosphere, to have been able to bring the hopes of young boys and girls with him to space. He died too young, Marc Garneau. He had many other stories to tell us and many other services to provide. Canada will miss Marc Garneau, Mr. Speaker, and we grieve his loss here in the House. He was a great man, a great Liberal, and above all, a great Canadian. Thank you very much, Marc. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent, Makiwanek. Mr. Speaker, it's with great humility and opportunity that I have the chance to pay tribute to the Honourable Marc Garneau. Our country lost one of its greatest Canadians and one of its, the Honourable Marc Garneau, throughout his life, and will remain so for hundreds of years, an inspiration for millions of Canadians. He spent his life in public service, everywhere, whether it was on Earth, on seas, or in space. He was a distinguished politician across Canada. We always remember him with words such as integrity, dignity, sense of responsibility, and he always did his job with such great humility. Mr. Speaker, Marc Garneau was born in Quebec City. It's a good start in life, of course. He did his brilliant studies as an engineer, but he didn't stop there. He got his diploma and did a PhD in engineering. He served as an officer in the Canadian Marines. And do you know what he did when he was young? He crossed the Atlantic in a sailboat. He thought it would be faster to go around the Earth in space than across the ocean in a sailboat. And he was the first Canadian to be an astronaut in space. There are 4,000 people in the country who applied for this position. He was the first out of 4,000 Canadians to be selected. He was the first man to go to space on October 5th, 1984. And at every anniversary of this date, I always keep a little picture of him, particularly when he was in the House, to mark the event, especially given my passion for space. It was an important milestone, and I remember that everyone who has kind of gray hair like me will remember where we were when Mr. Garneau was the first Canadian in space. And in his first mission, he paid honor to our country, not once but twice. He made a film with the IMAX camera, and it was a Canadian invention. And he always took care to film the famous Canadian arm.
Canada in space, the Canada arm, Mr. Speaker. We shall be proud of that all our life.
And when I met him once, I asked him, Mr. Garneau, you really paid a lot of attention to filming the Canadian arm and the Canadian flag and the word Canada. We see this a lot in your movies. And he said, no. Well, it just happened like that. He said, of course, as a proud Canadian, he was always careful to pay tribute to Canada and all of its splendor. And also, he brought back with him a hockey puck. So you're either Canadian or you're not. So that was his first trip to space. And Mr. Speaker, he didn't stop there. He made a second trip and even a third during a 16-year career. It's important because already as an astronaut, only a handful of people have gone to space. He went 3 times, which is proof of his intellectual ability, but also of his physical health. He was the perfect picture of a healthy mind and body. I am really impressed by this space, but he also was Capcom several times.
Monsieur le Président,
Apollo 13, Houston at the command center. People are there, they talk to each other, but there's only one person who speaks from Houston to the astronauts in space, and that's the Capcom. Why do I underline this? Because it was the only link there is between Earth and the astronauts in space. So Capcoms are the most important people for astronauts, especially since they are astronauts, particularly in the 60s. In the 60s, they really wanted people like them who know how to pilot aircraft and who to speak to. They don't want to just talk to an engineer that just flown a plane. Astronauts at the time were particularly sensitive. But Mr. Garneau was the first Capcom Canadian. He had the respect and admiration of all the other astronauts and of all those who worked in Houston, the different engineers and program directors, because he was the only person, and there were really long acronyms at the time, but he always knew what he was talking about. He was a direct link to astronauts, so we can be very proud of his work as an astronaut.
In politics, well, no one is perfect, obviously. Even if his memoir, he talked about a blue liberal. Not so bad. Good start. As we write, Mr. Speaker, without a joke with the fact that he was an astronaut, but he was a real star candidate, to say the least. Obviously, everybody knows him around the country. And as my honorable colleague said earlier, it was an attraction for everybody. So he worked hard, tirelessly, trying to convince people, and then suddenly, bang, he lost. This is what politics is all about. Well, it was not his first deception in politics, because he lost a second time in the leadership. But I will not repeat what my colleague said about the fact that it's incredible that he lost, the first election. Yes, he lost also against the leadership. But I will not repeat what the member said, that it's incredible that he lost the leadership. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, during an election campaign, candidates, well, we've seen star candidates. First, they get elected. When they lose, generally, we no longer see them in politics. But not Mr. Garneau. He continued, he persevered, and he is the proof that he was in politics for the right reasons, to serve. And he was elected first in the opposition, that happens, and then he was elected to the government, something I also wish. And he sat as a minister, and I dealt with him on several occasions, and I won't deny it. First time I saw him was at the cafeteria in the Centre Block. He was eating, just like anyone else. I said, I can't believe it. It's Marc Garneau there. And I was shaking. I said, hello, Mr. Garneau, nice to meet you. And he said, oh, yes. He knew me. I couldn't understand. I was just, I couldn't believe it. So he looked at me and I said, Mr. Garneau, how am I going to oppose you as a politician if you're one of the best Canadians? You make it hard for me. And he was very attentive, and I had many conversations with him with respect to the C series at the Bishop Airport, and he was also Minister of Foreign Affairs for only 9 months, unfortunately. But luckily, even if his life was too short, like my colleague said earlier, he was able to write his memoir, and it will be very helpful. I can never say that I'm one of his closest friends, but during our political careers and even after, we remained in contact. Sometimes we wrote each other with different observations, and the last time I wrote to him was a month ago. His granddaughter, Ryan, was celebrating her 5th birthday, and her little sister also wanted a toy, and I sent pictures to Mr. Garneau, and a few minutes later he answered. He replied, he said, hello, your granddaughters are adorable. They're ready to go to space. Yes, sir. Mr. Garneau, the future will always be inspired by your life, which was so inspiring for all Canadians. Thank you very much. The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for nearly 15 years, we have had the privilege of working alongside a man who left his mark on the history of Quebec and Canada. In the hubbub of parliamentary debate, in our political discussions where partisan fervour takes centre stage and quickly becomes heated, we too often forget the greatness of the men and women we are dealing with. And I plead guilty, Mr. Speaker. There are men and women here in this House whose professional and personal achievements are breathtaking. But who can boast of having spent 677 hours in space? Who can brag about having started their days looking at the Earth from the sky? Marc Garneau is the first Quebecer, the first Canadian to have achieved this absolutely extraordinary feat of going to space. Marc Garneau, the Honourable Marc Garneau, participated in 3 NASA missions, 1 Challenger mission and 2 Endeavour missions. He was responsible for operating the famous Canadian arm as well during his 2nd mission in space. An astronaut, Mr. Speaker. As you know, an astronaut with a suit like the ones we see in the movies that made us dream when we were children. Marc Garneau took the unattainable dream of so many young Quebecers and Canadians, young Quebec women and young Canadian women, and made it a reality. He paved the way for Chris Hadfield, Julie Payette, and David Saint-Jacques, just to name a few. He showed us the way to the stars. And of course, politically, we had our disagreements. And I remember the disagreements more than the agreements. But, well, the fact remains, he was one of the first federal Liberals to want to ensure that the Quebec nation was recognized by the federal government, and we can only salute his commitment to Quebec. The Canadian Space Program and the place that aeronautics and aerospace occupy in Quebec's economy, particularly in the greater metropolitan area, would not be the same without Marc Garneau's contribution. Mr. Speaker, Marc Garneau passed away yesterday, so to his family, his friends, his colleagues who served with him, and those who traveled around our blue planet with him, and to those who just chose to follow in his footsteps and embrace the dream of going to space, I offer on behalf of myself and the Bloc Québécois my deepest condolences. Thank you, Mr. Garneau.
The honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is with sincere and profound respect that New Democrats add our voices to honour the life and legacy of our colleague, the Honourable Marc Garneau, a trailblazer, a patriot, a devoted public servant, and an exceptional human being. As Canada's first astronaut, Mr. Garneau soared beyond our world, embodying the spirit of exploration and the pursuit of knowledge. His historic journey inspired a nation and marked a global milestone in our country's scientific achievements. We are inspired still by his wise words about Earth. It's our home, and we must take care of it, he said. Mr. Garneau dedicated himself to public service and this Parliament with resolve and with grace. As member and minister, he demonstrated by word and by action that it is possible to go beyond partisanship for the betterment of Canada. Throughout, he displayed an unwavering commitment to improve life for Canadians. In his quiet way, he stood courageously for his principles, often supporting opposition colleagues with words of encouragement. We especially appreciated his support for better mental health and addictions policies in this House. And he backed that up by voting, sometimes against his own party, for those principles. His leadership was characterized by integrity, rationality, and decency. Though possessed of a prodigious intellect, he comported himself with modesty and humor. He was one who truly earned the title honorable. Mr. Garneau's passing is a profound loss for our nation. Le décès de Marc Garneau est une profonde perte pour notre pays. We extend our deepest condolences to Marc's wife, Pam, his children, his family, and our colleagues in the Liberal Party, and all who were touched by his remarkable life. May his legacy continue to inspire future generations to reach for the stars and to serve with honor. Thank you and farewell.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a great honor today for me to speak, to join my voice to the other tributes that have been paid to our dear friend Marc Garneau. It is a great shock that he's no longer with us today. It was a great honor to have worked with him. He was a friend for over 14 years, and I worked with him here in this chamber because when I was elected in 2011, most of the Conservatives on this side of the House, well, they were, and Marc was in the corner there because the Liberal Party was the third party at the time. And there were only 4 bloc members then, and me in the corner over there.
At a time when Prime Minister Harper was proposing an omnibus bill to get rid of environmental rights, that was C-38 in the spring of 2012. I made an effort. I led the charge against that omnibus bill. And I was astounded when I saw that Marc Garneau decided to throw the Liberal Party's support behind me. Marc supported me in that effort, in that fight against that bill. And he joined in the battle against C-38.
Ordinary it was because in politics, I mean, he was the leader of the Liberal Party in the House then, and I had gone to the other party opposition leaders, and I'd said, look, I've got about 400 amendments to this, and I have the right to present them at report stage, but I really don't want to do it all by myself because I know it will generate a lot of opposition. And he said, let me think about it. It wasn't long, maybe a day, and I found that he had gone to a media scrum and said, we've decided to support what Elizabeth May is doing with these motions and amendments. And I thought, he could just as easily have taken them and presented them as Liberal amendments. I would never have said anything. I would have been grateful if someone else took up the fight. But that lack of partisanship in that moment, that willingness to be so generous, was absolutely breathtaking. And that cemented a friendship. I was so very honored to work with someone who was both, as we all know, un grand Canadien, un grand député.
A great Canadian, a great member of Parliament, a great man, and a person whose record in scientific circles and as an astronaut, as all my colleagues have previously said, with the 3 missions in space.
Reflected on that time in space, said what you can't really be ready for in your first time in space is the emotion, at an emotional and intellectual level, how looking down at Earth will profoundly affect you. So on this World Environment Day, it seems fitting and really hard to say goodbye to someone who was unfailingly kind, unfailingly respectful across party lines, and it come on at me to consider.
And as my Conservative friend said, he was a true star, an outstanding person.
Je n'oublierai.
I will never forget his last day here. His seat was just there, and I was here.
I mean, he took his leave of this place without this kind of round of speeches because he didn't let us know he was going till he stood one day and said, I'll be going now. He gave a speech begging us to cooperate more, to be more respectful. And I'll never forget it. He packed up his briefcase, buckled it, and started to walk on past the aisle, past me. I said, Marc, this is it? You're going today? This is it? I said, So I threw my arms around him. I gave him the biggest hug. It was the last time I saw him. I just said, I'm just going to miss you so much, but let's stay in touch. So I kick myself now. We didn't do that so well. But we've lost a very great human being, and to his entire family, my deepest condolences and sympathy. And know that in that space where he looks down at planet Earth now, I think it's a place called heaven. Thank you.
Honorable colleagues, thank you very much for speaking in the paying tribute to our colleague Marc Garneau.
Of sterling integrity, an adventurer, a Canadian hero. Si vous avez eu l'occasion de parler à...
If you had the opportunity to speak to Marc, you would have realized how accomplished he was. Everything he did was at the highest level of excellence.
An opera lover, and as anyone who has read his autobiography, A Most Extraordinary Ride, will know, a gifted writer.
He was also a devoted family man, and the last time I spoke to him, a year ago, he talked about that book and what it meant to have written it for his family. I am halfway through the book, and I hear Marc's voice every time I turn the page. I can hear his sense of humor as he describes his adventures in space and politics.
In the summer of 1969, while many of my generation were sitting in front of televisions watching a fuzzy picture, Marc Garneau was on a 57-foot sailboat called the Pickle. He was part of a crew of 13 in a race from Newport, Rhode Island to Cork, Ireland, crossing the Atlantic Ocean. He spoke about floating on a tranquil sea, gazing up at the moon in a brilliant night sky, listening to the radio as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin took their first steps on the moon's own sea of tranquility. It was while he floated on a boat, one of the world's oldest forms of transportation, that the seed was planted for him to one day make his own great voyage in a ship of another kind into space.
Marc was a man of great courage and great conviction. And like all members of Parliament, he brought his own perspective to this place. He was impressively intelligent, and he had wisdom that may have come from the silence and tranquility of space. Canadians, in particular members of this place, all benefited from his wisdom.
Journey, we wish him peace and offer our deepest gratitude. To his family, we present our condolences and hope that his extraordinary legacy is a source of comfort and pride. Merci. I wish to inform the House that the volume of earpieces will now be reset. Orders of the day.